Hello, my name is Spencer, and in my podcast called The Dictionary, I literally read from the dictionary, but add in my personal comments and stupid jokes to make it more interesting. Episodes are family-friendly, short, and air every single day on basically every podcast platform. Come join me on this journey filled with edutainment.
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you never saw, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
And my name is Daniel Kaka.
So, Dan, What are we talking about today?
So we are talking about, I don't know if you've heard of this show before, but we are talking about Red Dwarf.
Red Dwarf. Now, didn't we already talk about Red Dwarf?
We already talked about Red Dwarf, and it felt like we talked about it till we were red in the face. But so it was because of an email that we got from James Morgan, because he was disappointed. Well, I don't want to say disappointed because we did talk pretty intensely about Red Dwarf, but he thought that we were going to go down the avenue in which we would discover that there was a Red Dwarf movie that did not get made, and we did not go down that avenue. And looking back at it and going through the notes that I made, honestly, we probably could have made Red Dwarf a two-parter. So instead of saying like this is a amendment for what we did, we're just going to call this Red Dwarf Part 2.
Part 2. You know, instead of the sequel coming right away, this is the before sunset of How Did This Not Get Made episode.
Yes, exactly.
You'll get Part 2, but in a little while.
Yes. We're coming right back into Red Dwarf. What do you remember about Red Dwarf?
Well, I remember the robot dude. I remember Cat. I remember how charming and lovable the British characters were, and like the schlubby guy and the anal retentive guy and their misfit adventures. And then I remember how I really did not like the American version of that, where they turned the schlubby guy into basically Joel McHale / Han Solo.
I mean, even the guy who played that role didn't even like that role, so you're not alone in that.
I remember it being a show that was like, this is really cool, and I have not watched it.
Yes.
Have you actually watched the show since we last talked about it?
I haven't. And I feel like I'm an imposter from the outside going into this.
I think our listeners understand. There's a lot of good TV.
It's a lot of good TV.
There's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah. Like, I'm still going through all The Simpsons. Ted Lasso is on right now.
I haven't even seen Ted Lasso.
Okay. You need to.
I don't have... Okay, everybody... I was talking to a friend the other day. Everybody has, I feel like, one of those premium streaming things that they don't have.
Yeah.
So we have Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and HBO Max. We're missing Apple TV Plus.
Yeah.
Everybody's got one of those major things that they don't have.
Yeah.
At least.
It's like finding a friend that has Paramount Plus and you're just like, why?
Really? I'm too busy just rewatching Community over and over again to watch anything new.
I got plenty of shows that I need to go through. But we're not here to talk about that. We are talking about one specific show, Red Dwarf. So we're going to kind of pick up where we left off from the first episode. And if you want to know about the history of Red Dwarf, we are not going to provide it in this episode. Just listen to our previous episode. If this is the first episode you're listening to, why? Go back to the first one, learn about the history of Red Dwarf, because we are going to be starting way, way later. In fact,
remind me, when was the American pilot made?
The American pilot was in the mid-90s.
Okay.
I forget the specific date, but it was around like early mid-90s is when that was supposed to come out.
Gotcha.
April 5th, 1999, Red Dwarf nearly premiered the finale of Red Dwarf, which was titled Only the Good. The show was in a tricky spot. We discussed in our previous episode the gap the show experienced between Series 6, which was in 1993, to Series 7 in 1997. The show's creators, Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, went their separate ways. Grant went to work on other productions like Dark Ages and The Strangerers.
Okay.
Strangerers.
That sounds like Best Fiends.
Yes. While Naylor stayed with Red Dwarf and continued the series. At the same time, the cast members wanted to work on other productions. When Series 7 premiered in January 17th of 1997, audiences were baffled when they noticed the format of the sci-fi sitcom no longer had an audience, meaning that they were no longer filming in front of a live studio audience and the laugh track was gone. The idea was to make the episodes to be produced more like a film. It has been recognized that Red Dwarf looked a lot better in this format. It had a lot more of a cinematic look in this case. For the production, it was much easier to manage, especially with a special effects heavy show. No longer did effects and complicated scenes had to be done ahead of time for audiences to react to the show in the studio. The production could take their time, get angles that were better suited for the scene. They didn't have to play to the audience. These all sound like great decisions, but if we know fans of anything, we know that if you change the thing that everyone loves, they are not going to like it.
Speaking of Community, when Community was bought by Yahoo, the show just had a totally different look to it. It was shot differently, and a lot of people thought it looked cheaper because it was at Yahoo now. I mean, Yahoo's trying to make a TV show, but it actually had a higher budget at Yahoo than it did at NBC. So it was actually better produced, but people didn't like the look because it was just felt different.
It was a change. No one likes a change.
Yeah, exactly.
Those opinions were heard by the Red Dwarf production, and for Series 8, they changed their format back to filming in front of a live studio audience like it was done before. So back to the final episode of Series 8. Out of the whole series, this episode was one of the most difficult to produce, having the most numerous rewrites and reshoots. For Naylor, he was in the opposite position, not knowing if he would end the series or if he needed to leave it open-ended just in case he got picked up for another series. In the original draft, which was titled Earth, the Red Dwarf crew arrived back to Earth with a ship accidentally crashing through major landmarks. The cost to make this happen was far out of their budget, especially with their episode titled Pete, which featured a bunch of CGI dinosaurs.
It was a hot one. With it being a dino, I thought I could stand it.
There was a proposed ending where Arnold Rimmer runs away and a heroic alter ego Ace Rimmer returns to save the day. But that ending didn't actually get filmed.
Is Arnold, that's the guy who's always trying to get his whatever chicken dish it was. What was it that he was trying to eat all the time?
Arnold, well, it was the chicken vindaloo, but Arnold Rimmer is the one with the H on his forehead.
Okay. Arnold Rimmer's a hologram, okay. Because I was going to say, it would have been really funny if it was the other guy, and then the Ace version is the American Han Solo 2.0.
So along with this unfilmed ending, there was another ending that was filmed at the very last minute. This can actually be viewed on the Series 8 DVD special features, or you can just simply do a simple Yahoo or a YouTube search.
A Yahoo search.
Yahoo! In this version, Rimmer goes to a mirror universe to retrieve an antidote formula for a virus that is eating the ship. When he comes back, the written formula has changed from the antidote to the formula for the virus. So now he must go back and forth attempting to memorize the formula, which takes him about 2 hours to do.
Cesium francolithic mixyalbidium rixy-dixy-doxy-dexydroxide. Yes!
Cesium francolithic mixyalbidium rixy-dixy-doxy-dexydroxide. It's really famous.
Turns out the compound is common knowledge with the rest of the crew, and Crichton makes the antidote just in time to save the ship. Rimmer takes his spot in the captain's quarters. Lister, Kat, and Kochansky are celebrating, and Crichton resumes his ironing duties. I think we needed to see the episode in order for that to be funny, but yes. You had to be there. The Red Dwarf leaves behind Captain Frank Hollister and the flight officers in their fleet of starbugs and blue midgets.
The captain and the crew. Shall I program the ship to slow down so they can board?
Full ahead, Mr. Crichton. I see no ships.
While spitefully saluting Hollister from far away. So basically, he's just leaving the crew that double-crossed him from before, and they're off on their own adventure. The alternate ending concludes with Rimmer paying back the money that he owes to a vending machine, which he stole from earlier, but the machine still fires a can at Rimmer's head, knocking him unconscious. So that was the proposed ending if they were just going to end it right there. And I think it's a pretty good ending because, like, you can conclude the story at that point, but also say, like, oh, they're just going to keep on going off on their own adventures and still leave it open-ended.
It's a tough balance to do with a story, and I know that, like, it's a big thing with TV shows all the time is they never know if they're going to get picked up for another season. So it's like always trying to find that perfect balance of satisfying conclusion, but something that can still have more to it.
Yeah, it's basically the end of any horror movie because any horror movie could potentially become a franchise. So you can't exactly kill off Michael Myers. Like, Michael Myers has died so often, and to even reboot it when they brought back Halloween, 2 or 3 years ago, they're like, you know what, we're just going to ignore all the other sequels, and we're just going to say, like, the first one's canon, and then this one, and then we're going to start a whole new franchise where they, like, burn down the house that was inside of, and then they... Anyway, it's ridiculous. But we need that suspension of disbelief in order for this killer to keep on going.
Sure.
So the actual ending of Series 8, it ends with the Grim Reaper, which was played by the series director Ed By. He comes to claim Rimmer. Rimmer kicks Death in the crotch and runs down a flaming corridor claiming, "Only the good die young."
Remember, only the good die young.
The end of the episode cuts to a title card that reads, "The End," and soon is refuted with, "The smeg it is." The fate of the Red Dwarf would be unknown. So, what happened after this? Well, Doug Naylor was on his own if he wanted to continue the series. When he pitched the 9th series to the BBC, they actually turned him down. The show had totaled 52 episodes, which at the time in 1999, it qualified for internal syndication. Nowadays, well, I guess a few years ago, but that number was bumped up to 100 episodes in order for you to run syndication.
I know it's been 100 in America for a while, but I assume that British rules work differently.
They're probably different because their seasons are a lot shorter.
Yeah.
And then because of streaming, that just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Naylor decided to take a big swing and decided to make a Red Dwarf movie. As of August 2000, the main cast of Red Dwarf had signed to make the film, and they would include Chris Berry as Rimmer, Craig Charles as Lister, Danny John Jules as Kat, Robert Llewellyn as Crichton, Chloe Annette as Kachansky, Norman Lovett as the computer Holly, and Mac McDonald as Captain Hollister. They were informed that filming would begin early of May of 2001. We're going to be spewing out a lot of dates here, so kind of try and, I guess, keep things in order. So May 2001, they are going to begin filming.
Yeah.
Doug Naylor and Ed By, a longtime director of the series, submitted a script to Shepperton Studios to be worked on, and at the end of March 22nd, 2001, the main cast had a table read for the proposed Red Dwarf movie. The script had undergone 35 rewrites and was estimated to cost about $19 million to make.
Oof.
This would lead to Naylor having to do some recasting, which he was unprepared for. This would cause many setbacks. When May of 2001 came around, the time that they were supposed to begin filming, they were still under pre-production, with storyboards still being drawn at this time. The new start date had been pushed to September of the same year, with the anticipation of the movie being released in the summer of 2002. The second table read happened in May of 2001 with the new revisions. Usually table reads are filmed, but this table read, actually, they only recorded the audio, and then they edited the audio to actually match up with the storyboards that they made, and they actually made into like the storyboard animation so that it was a much better outline for the crew to look at.
I didn't realize that most table reads were filmed. Like, I have seen clips of table reads, but I guess it didn't click with me that that's like a common practice. Like, won't somebody please release the Force Awakens table read?
Oh, right.
Which was like a famous story for a while about how like Mark Hamill was the one reading all the stage directions,
Yes.
and nobody realized that that's because he didn't do anything else in the movie. Or the other table read that I'm sure wasn't filmed that I would have loved to see. The movie Heathers, when they were first working on the script, before they went into production, before they started casting, they did, and this is like another common thing, just to kind of see how it feels for the writing process, they hired a local acting class to read through the script. I wish it was filmed because reading for Christian Slater's part was a young up-and-coming Brad Pitt.
Interesting.
So before Brad Pitt was Brad Pitt, he read one of the early drafts of Heathers. I love Heathers, and I think Christian Slater is great in it. Brad Pitt would have been something else entirely and would have also been super interesting.
Because I'm trying to think of Brad Pitt in Thelma and Louise, and that's the type of Brad Pitt we would have gotten.
I'm imagining like Fight Club Brad Pitt or 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys is probably a little too crazy for...
Yeah, I think that would have been too much. I think he was more so just still trying to find his own. So imagining him as Thelma and Louise Brad Pitt in the position in Heathers, it would be really interesting.
What's that character's name? I don't remember the character's name now.
Jason Dean?
Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Jason Dean.
Anyways.
Pre-production continued as planned. And as of June of 2001, new molds were made for Robert Llewellyn for his Crichton costume. In July 13th, 2001, director Ed Bye left the production, leaving Naylor to direct the film on his own. I'm not sure what led to Ed's decision to leave, but around this time it was also announced that they were going to film a standalone movie. So with the events that actually took place before the series began. Understandably so, we were talking about Community. I know that there's this big push of like wanting 6 seasons in a movie.
Yeah.
They got their 6 seasons, but what about the movie? And there's a lot of people that are demanding the movie from Dan Harmon. And Dan Harmon has actually been outspoken as to why he's been hesitant about making the movie. And his explanation is that you need to make this movie widely appealing. So you need to understand that there's an audience out there that has never seen the show. So they need to be able to follow along with all of the characters. But at the same time, you are dealing with diehard fans who know everything about Community and they want a satisfying ending.
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance where you can like sneak in things that are from the show, but also explaining to the audience, like, this is from the show without overly explaining everything?
Yeah, that's definitely a tough balance. I remember hearing a thing of Joss Whedon talking about making Serenity and that challenge of having all these characters that some audiences are very familiar with, but other audiences are meeting for the first time. You have to introduce these characters and make them all work together in a complete satisfying story. And then he was talking about how that's quite a challenge that he would never want to do again, where he had to bring all these different characters together that some people would be familiar with and some people wouldn't be familiar with. Like if they were like superheroes or something, and he had to be responsible for both introducing them and playing to people who already know them.
Yeah. That's always been my argument with Marvel, is that at this point, if you have to watch the newest Marvel movie and someone's like, oh, you also have to watch these 25 movies before then.
But I think Marvel actually does a good job. Like, I know people who saw Infinity War and Endgame with seeing like maybe 2 or 3 other Marvel movies and totally got it and loved them. And I feel like they've been doing a lot of standalones lately. You can watch Shang-Chi without seeing anything. Well, you probably can't watch Black Widow without seeing anything.
Yeah.
But I imagine like The Eternals is going to be another one where you don't have to have seen anything.
Yeah. And now that they're introducing the multiverse, they can basically just do whatever they want and be like, it's still technically a part of it. It was just in a different universe, and that could just be its own standalone. So it's going to be an interesting balance to see what they actually do with the multiverse.
Yeah.
Without having to actually explain the multiverse, and that way you can actually start making your own standalone movies, which is actually pretty neat. September had arrived. That was when they were supposed to shoot.
Mm-hmm. The second time.
Yeah. And there was no news of filming going along, mostly because it wasn't happening. In the attempt to release anything, on October 12th, more storyboards were released, and again on January 11th of 2002, there was still no sign of filming the actual movie itself. Fast forward to September 13th, 2002, a full year after the initial delayed start date. It was announced that producer Charles Emitage, he said that they were in pre-production.
What?
With pre-production to start in November of 2002 and filming to begin in March of 2003.
What do you mean by pre-production?
Meaning that they're thinking about going into pre-production.
This is like some teenagers at a Bible school pre-engaged nonsense.
Yes. Yeah. It's the promise ring before the engagement ring.
The promise ring of movie announcements.
So he tried to explain the delays. He said, it's a combination of dates, budgets, and instability of financial markets and other productions. Just a bunch of bullshit that he's spewing out there.
Yeah.
We're waiting until Chris Berry and Harvey Harrison, who was supposed to be the director of photography, he was currently working on Lara Croft 2.
Okay.
In October 2002, ads for crew member jobs for the Red Dwarf movie began appearing in Australia. Now, this was an actual good indicator that this might actually be happening this time.
Yeah.
Ads for the actual movie began appearing online and in magazines, and it actually showed the plot summary, the characters, the TV show, there was a fan club, books, merch, DVD sales.
The crew, it makes me think about in the Force Awakens hype when Disney had just bought Star Wars and they were saying they were going to make episode 7. I remember there being a moment where people started to find casting calls, and that's when people were like, oh, there's casting calls. This is really happening. We're getting new Star Wars.
Yeah. Here was the plot that was put out there in all these ads. It says, Red Dwarf the movie is set in the distant future where Homo sapienoids, a fearsome combination of flesh and machine, and the next step of human evolution, have taken over the solar system and almost wiped out the human race. The only survivors are the crew of the long-hauled space freighters that left Earth before the conflict began. The sapienoids sent forth fleets of death ships to hunt them down. One by one, the human ships fall until only one remains. Its name, Red Dwarf. That's a pretty good synopsis right there.
Yeah.
That would get me excited to see it. April 2003, it was announced that Red Dwarf would start filming again in Australia, but starting in September. But again, that did not go according to plan.
This would be September 2004 now?
2003.
2003. Okay, right.
I told you I'm going to throw a lot of dates at you, and it might be hard to follow along.
Just trying to keep the line of events.
Yes. Now, June of 2004, at Dimension Jump 11, which is a weekend-long convention dedicated solely to Red Dwarf, Doug Naylor, he did not attend, by the way, but he did release a statement about the film. To explain the delay, he claimed that a firm was willing to invest $10 million of the $15 million budget, but when he managed to finish the script, the company's share went through the floor and so did their money. They also tried to take advantage of the EIS, which is the Enterprise Investment Scheme, which is a tax incentive which would guarantee them 30% back of every $1 million that they spent on their budget. But that was retracted. This led Red Dwarf looking for a new investor and a new location to film. Naylor went to Germany, Austria, Spain, Canada, Italy, France, and New Zealand, but found no luck in those places. The source is unknown, but there was a claim that a distributor offered to invest if they could make the movie for $6 million. Naylor was okay with cutting the budget down to $13 million, but going less than half of that just simply wasn't going to cut it for him.
It's so interesting thinking about this whole budget fight, because I feel like if this were to happen today, a movie being made about a hit long-running TV show would be a no-brainer and people would throw as much money at it as they could. So it's just funny how, at the time, this was much more oh, we don't know, let's keep it small.
Yeah.
$6 million, that's less than Star Wars was made for with $1977. And that's a movie that was going as cheap as they could with, half of that movie takes place in white Death Star hallways. To give a smaller budget than untested Star Wars in 77 with $2004, that's so bizarre to me.
Yeah. But also, this is just one firm that's offering it.
No, that's true. And I guess British market is a lot smaller and it's not something that had success in America.
Yeah. I assume that they were thinking that they were going to be one of many firms that were going to be investing in this. And then when they find out, oh, we're the only one? Okay. I don't know about that. This is my favorite part of the story. The production got a glimmer of hope when Naylor, while in Australia, got a call from the Duke of Manchester, who claimed that he had approximately $60 million that he could use to invest in movies and any form of entertainment. Now, Naylor told him that $60 million was the perfect amount that they needed to make this movie.
How much do you think this movie would cost? That depends. How much do you have in your wallet? Oh, $60 million?
What are the chances?
What a coincidence!
So they agreed to meet in person and go over the details. Surely, a duke with millions of dollars to throw away could easily travel around the world in leisure, but it was kind of weird when the duke asked Naylor if he could pay for his plane ticket and if he could stay on his couch while in Australia. Naylor figured he was getting played because he looked up the Duke of Manchester, who is real. His name is Alexander Montagu. He found out that he actually lives in Australia and that his family has been there since the beginning of the 20th century. Instead of dropping this right away, Naylor dug further and asked if he could speak with the Duke's bank manager, who happened to be too busy to talk to him, but instead faxed a clearly fake bank statement showing that the Duke had $100 million in his account. The last thing that Naylor heard from the Duke was that he was in talks with a very famous Australian actress to be in the movie. When Naylor asked if he could meet with her, she claimed, I think he actually got someone else to say this, she claimed that she had a very bad cold and that she couldn't meet with him.
Oh my gosh.
And then he asked what her name was. She did not give that up, but she instead said, quote, "I really am the famous actress."
I really am Nicole Kidman.
Yes. That was my first thought, was like Nicole Kidman. Like, you could have easily just said Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Oh, some actress whose name rhymes with Mafol Flidpin. No, it's Hugh Jackman.
I knew it. No, it's Mel Gibson.
Oh, yeah. Wait, can we go back? Do we know who this fake Duke of Manchester was?
No one knows who he was. He was just a scammer. That's it.
You should have at least invited him to your couch just to find. I mean, he probably could have been a serial killer, so maybe that wouldn't have been a good idea.
I don't even think he would have gone to the couch. He would have just taken the money, because he was just asking for money to get onto the plane. But it would have literally been funny to be like, "I bought the plane ticket. Here's your seats. Get on."
Yeah. I was imagining this was like some random Red Dwarf fan who was just trying to talk to the creator of his favorite show. And so was like, "Yes, I'm the Duke of Manchester. Let me visit your movie set."
That would be pretty great. But yeah, as far as like uncovering who that person was, that was never actually revealed.
I feel like it could be like the pitch of a DCOM or something like that.
So, yeah. But yeah, Red Dwarf managed to return in 2007. After failing to make its way to the silver screen, they briefly went back to a smaller screen. No, a much smaller screen.
A cell phone?
Yes. In fact, they decided to return onto cell phones and mobile devices. So prior to the release of...
Wait, really?
Mm-hmm. Prior to the release of Red Dwarf Back to Earth, BBC Two agreed to make a series of bite-sized animated shorts called mobisodes.
Wait, I've got something. I'm punching it up.
Too small for a vessel, maybe some kind of missile.
It's impossible to tell at this range. Whatever it is, they clearly have a technology way in advance of our own.
So does the Albanian State Washing Machine Company.
Step up to red alert.
Sir, are you absolutely sure? It does mean changing the bulb.
What year was this?
This was 2007.
Oh my gosh.
The only people that could watch these are anyone that had a BBC app subscription. So this wasn't even around the time where like a Netflix subscription was fairly well known. Netflix was still DVDs and kind of toying with the idea that you could stream movies. So the idea of streaming anything on your phone was just this foreign concept.
2007 was also when iPhones were first released, so nobody had a smartphone.
No.
But I do remember this being the time where, like, a lot of TV channels were trying out streaming on their own website. I remember watching a bunch of stuff on, like, the NBC website. I was really into Heroes at the time, and they had this little, like, mini web show that sort of tied in with the actual TV show stuff. There was one character who was like a big part of their streaming miniseries that like showed up in one episode of the TV show. It was a whole big deal. But I remember this was the kind of thing that like 30 Rock even made jokes about, of like online tie-in stuff. That was like a big thing in the mid-aughts and then disappeared.
I can't remember the joke exactly, and I'll probably pull up a clip, but they even brought it up in happy endings.
I guess no one will ever love me. Now I know how webisodes feel.
I remember they did stuff like that for Community, where they had these like 30-second little webisodes, and they
did it for The Office, too.
Office. Yeah. I love that for Red Dwarf it was animated, though. But also animated for a show that hadn't been on the air in how many years?
2007, so the last we saw it was 1999.
Okay, so in 8 years, TV show hasn't been on the air, and I guess this is kind of promoting their comeback. That's still so bizarre.
They're putting out a little tease. They're testing the waters. So like, will people actually watch it? But you also put it on a platform where no one is going to see this at all.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, each episode was less than a minute long. They were flash animated. A lot of them were just forgettable. Again, a simple YouTube search. You can actually find all these episodes if you want to watch them. But the big splash was when BBC Two agreed to release a shorter series of Red Dwarf with only 3 episodes to see if audiences were interested. This is after Naylor was initially denied to making a full series 9. The series, it actually played more like a parody, which was leaning more as like an homage to Blade Runner.
Move in. Stop. Pull out track right. Stop.
Zoom 260. Rotate 90 degrees. Track in. Swallow's business address.
Sir, wouldn't it have been quicker to look him up in the phone book?
And it's actually pretty neat that they went down this avenue.
Was it using the idea of like the Homo sapienoids from the movie?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Audiences were excited to finally see new episodes after almost a decade-long hiatus.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for viewers, they weren't given any satisfaction from the Series 8 cliffhangers and had further questions about Rimmer returning as a hologram, even though the character was replaced by Ace in the prior 2 series. So the series, in its timeline, it takes place 9 years later. So they just kind of assumed that everything just kind of reset itself within that time span. They also killed off Kachansky right away because I think they couldn't book her for whatever reason. So she wasn't involved with it. Regardless, the 3 episodes were popular enough to actually give that series 3 more episodes to finish off the series. In May of 2019, years later, Robert Llewellyn was interviewed on the radio station Talk Sport and let it slip that he was going to start working on the 13th series of Red Dwarf. In June of 2019, Danny John Jules told The Sun in an interview that even though he hasn't received a script, he was expecting filming for the 13th series to wrap up at the end of the year. In October, it was officially announced that Channel Dave, the network that distributed Red Dwarf since their revival, would not be renewing the show for a 13th series, but instead would produce a 90-minute feature-length special, basically a made-for-TV movie. To please the fans even further, the movie would be filmed in front of a live studio audience. From the research that I looked up, I believe that this is the first and only movie that has been filmed entirely in front of a live studio audience.
Really? There wasn't ever like a made-for-TV movie of like other sitcoms?
No.
Wow.
Do you think I'm some kind of god? God? You've scarcely mastered human. I'm just a man. A nobody, really. Come on, guys, back me up here.
He's a
Less than nobody. An absolute zero.
What have you found, sir?
Holy spare disc.
What's happening, dudes?
We're stranded on this moon in Starbug Hole. Is there any way to get out?
Have you considered opening the door?
To be put into that format, obviously there have been movies before where like it shows people in front of a live audience and whatnot, but I would not consider any plays that are filmed. So like, for example, Hamilton, I don't consider that.
That's different.
As part of it. But like this was on purpose, filmed like a sitcom, but to be the length of a movie.
It's funny how they went away from the laugh track, everybody hated it, and now they're like, we're going to double down on this so hard, you guys, that we're going to do an entire movie like this. This is what you want.
So along with the movie, they also produced 3 60-minute documentaries all about the first 12 series. And I realized that actually while doing the research for this, I dove deep into a lot of these documentaries, not realizing that this was actually part of this movie. The film was slated to begin production in December of 2019, and things were looking up for the fans when in January 2020, publicity photos were released of actor Ray Rodon in the role of Rodon, the leader of the feral cats. In February 14th, 2020, the day before the show's 32nd anniversary, the official Red Dwarf website released a synopsis of the movie. Quote, "The special will see the posse meet 3 cat clerics, Tom Bennett, Mandeep Dylon, and Lucy Pierman, who worship Lister as their god. Lister vows to help them with being hunted by Rodon, a ruthless feral cat leader, who has vowed to wipe out all cats who worship anyone but him." In April 9th, 2020, Red Dwarf: The Promised Land premiered. There hasn't been any announcements on whether or not this show will continue, but if it ended there, it would not be a bad place for it to end. But yeah, that's the story of the Red Dwarf movie. Something else to cover our tracks so that we don't have to do this again. So there was an unmade episode titled Identity Within, which was supposed to be the second episode of the 7th series. It was replaced by the episode Stroke Me a Clipper. It was a cat-centered episode that portrayed him being more domesticated and less independent. The writers did not like the direction of the character and decided to scrap the episode, but if you are interested in watching it, you can actually find the voice-acted storyboard, again, through a simple YouTube search.
Interior Medibay. In semi-darkness, something is thrashing, panting, whipping around under sheets. Crichton's hands are trying to calm it.
No, try to relax.
The door bursts open. It's Lister. No offense. None taken, ugly. But when you wake me up, it had better be good.
But yeah, that's Red Dwarf Part 2.
All right. You know, I gotta say, when I heard we were coming back to Red Dwarf, I was a little skeptical if we'd have enough to talk about, especially because a large part of these episodes sometimes is going into the original source material, because sometimes the stories themselves have a couple of exciting moments, but aren't necessarily enough to fill up a whole podcast episode. I'm very happy that there's a couple of good moments in this.
Yeah.
It definitely justified the return. So thank you again to that email writer for suggesting we come back to the well.
Yes, James Morgan is his name, so thank you.
Yes, thank you, James.
Yes. So yeah, there was a lot in there. I'm really glad that I went to it. I know that during our fan response episode that we said that we would include it at the end of a episode, but originally this was supposed to be at the end of the Doctor Who episode. But because the research was just so vast, I was like, no, this deserves its own show.
Deserves its own thing. Absolutely, as it should. Well, I guess it's going to go ahead and wrap us up for today. So thank you, everybody, so much for listening. If you want to find more of this podcast, you can go ahead and find our website, pipedreampodcast.com, where you can also find our shows such as Come On Fahoogwapods, as well as Escape from Vault Disney and the Mystery Shack Look Back. While you're there, you can check out our Patreon page. We are so thankful to everybody who gives to us on Patreon to help keep the show going. And you can also find links to our social media pages. We are on Twitter at HDTNGM. We are on Instagram at How Did This Not Get Made? And you can send us your emails with suggestions, notgetmade@gmail.com. Again, the email suggestions have been so awesome and so helpful for finding new stories about this. It's tough to learn about movies that were never made. There are resources out there, but I always appreciate if somebody's ever heard of a good story that we should cover.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for listening.
Thank you.